All right, everybody, it's the Combatcast with the man called Dave and Chevy, and we're going to talk about this past weekend's fight night, Ursa and Moreno, UFC Mexico. We're going to talk about some stuff going around the ring. We're going to talk Emmett and Murphy this weekend. Before we do that, Chevy, let's talk about our upcoming schedule.
All right, April 12th, UFC 314, Volkanovski versus Lopez, 10 p.m., Miami. Patty Pimblett, Michael Chandler, I believe, is on that card as well. Looking forward to this card. The whole thing is looking very, very good. Pitbull and Yair, fantastic card. And then April 19th, no UFC. We're going to be talking a little bit about PFL, I think, since there's a tournament that's currently going on. We'll be talking about that. And then April 26th, UFC Fight Night, Hill versus Roundtree, 9 p.m. Eastern, Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay. Yeah, and there's rumors that I heard that Hill might be injured and someone else might be stepping in, but that's not confirmed.
Right, nothing confirmed yet, but I wouldn't be surprised with the way that fights fall out at the.
This has been a very injury plague 2025, and we've just started. It feels like so. Yeah, hopefully we'll not have too many injuries, but we'll see what happens. Definitely some better cards on the horizon, it looks like, though. Hopefully they all stick together. Let's get to what's coming around the ring here. And I guess first thing we'll talk about is PFL has a card this Thursday. And for our audio listeners, well, that's probably already come out.
Right, yeah. I don't know why the fight's on a Thursday. Normally they fight on Friday nights, but it's Thursday this week, so that's April 3rd. It's kicking off the 2025 PFL World Tournament. It's the first round, headlined by Jason Jackson and Andrei Koreshkov. Koreshkov was a belt holder in Bellator, so it's a welterweight bout. Also, of note, coming to the UFC, Kyoji Horiguchi drops his Ryzen belt and signs with the UFC in the flyweight division.
Yeah. So flyweight, he's fought at bantamweight a few times too, right?
Yeah, that's just what I read, but he could be up or down. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we saw him fight at Mohegan Sun, and he was in Bellator. Yeah, he was fighting Sergio Pettis, right?
Fight that he had pretty much won and then got knocked out with about 1-2 seconds remaining, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
Yeah. He's been in the UFC before. He's had fights with Mighty Mouse, so he's a veteran of the sport, and he's a good talent no matter what weight class you'll see him at. So he'll be interested to see his first couple fights in the UFC.
Mm-hmm. Looking forward to it.
All right, let's go to this past weekend's fight night. Urseg versus Moreno. UFC Mexico. Great crowd here. Before we get to the fights, also newsworthy on this, one of the fights, Joe Pfeiffer, Kelvin Gastelum out. Joe Pfeiffer came down with some illness.
Yeah, I guess people were telling him that it was altitude sickness, but he said he had acclimated and everything for 2 weeks, like in a hyperbaric or an altitude tent or whatever. I don't know how much that works or whatever, or if he actually got sick. But, you weight cut and deplete your body, and then you're susceptible to all sorts of things. So he said he's never fighting in Mexico City again or at altitude or whatever. I don't know, but it's just that was the most exciting fight on the card for sure. And it was a bummer that I got called off. But overall, the card was still pretty good.
Yeah, and I think they're hoping to get that fight scheduled again soon, too.
I hope so.
Yeah. All right. Any other fights before we get to the main event and co-main event?
Yeah, I just want to shout out Raul Rojas Jr. got a win in Mexico as a decision win, but he did show some improvement in his boxing skills. He's still clearly a grappler, but he definitely is showing improvement in the couple of years he's been in the UFC. So they're bringing him along pretty well.
All right, let's talk about this co-main event.
Okay, Manuel Torrez versus Drew Dober.
Yeah, Torrez looks sharp, real sharp here. I thought Dober looked a little tentative here. Like, like coming off a few losses, Dober's usually one who wants to go all out. And I thought he looked a little hesitant. And then he wanted to, I'm sure Dober would have mixed up, but I thought Torrez was just like he read it and he was on it. He gets the quick finish, round 1. Dober didn't even realize the fight had been stopped. He was still trying to fight at one point, it looked like.
What did you think of the stoppage?
What's that?
What did you think of the stoppage?
I didn't have a problem with it. I know some people said it was late. Some people said it was Dober. I thought it was early. I think Dober didn't know where he was.
No, he was out.
Yeah. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought that he probably got knocked out and came back too. And that's just probably what happened. Yeah. So good on I don't even know who the referee was for this one. Do you remember?
I think it was Beltran.
Yeah. So good on him. Good stoppage. Tough break for Dober. Hopefully he gets another fight in the UFC because I really do like
I think he will.
Yeah, I'd like to see him get another shot. So, but Manuel Torrez, he's killing it. And I was looking at the top 15. His one loss is against like one of the guys in the top 15. So I'd like to see him maybe getting another exciting fighter, like maybe a Jim Miller or a Bobby Green, somebody like that with a name value. I like those guys, but if you can get one of them to fight him, this is what you try to do, right? With a guy like Manuel Torrez, you try to bring him up, and then if he can get a win, hopefully you do put him in there against a top 15 opponent.
Yeah. I did think that the stoppage was late, but I understood why, because Dober was like holding on to Torres's leg, and it looked like he was kind of going for a takedown or whatever, but he was getting hammer fisted.
Right.
And he never like went limp. So I get why it was hard to stop the fight. But yeah, he was clearly out. When he got up, he was still trying to fight, and the ref was standing in front of him and telling him it was stopped. And I think you're probably right. He probably went out and came back too, and was probably still getting punched in the face, and he's just a fighter. So, but that happens. I'd rather, in that situation, it should be the same all the time in theory, but the guy might be fighting for his career at this point. You let him go out all the way. He was out. So he got every opportunity to defend himself. So, all right, moving on. Main event, Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg.
I thought Moreno looked great here. Speed on display. I think that was the big difference here was his quickness. I thought Erceg fought a good fight. I thought he won round 2, maybe a little, I think he was competitive in some of these rounds, but at the end of the day, Moreno just looked like the better fighter. But I thought also credit to Erceg, who competitively fought against the champion, but then got knocked out by Kai Kara France. I thought, coming off that loss, he was set up here really where this could have just been a complete showcase for Moreno, who really wanted to get this win in Mexico. He never seemed to have good luck, but that wasn't the case. I thought Erceg made a great account of himself, and you see why these top flyweights are so good in the adjustments they're making. That being said, good for Moreno. And he's just one of those guys I think you can plug in, whether it's a matchup again. That's what you're doing, though. You're kind of recycling some of these matchups. You could do Cape, Manuel Cape, because that's a fight that hasn't happened yet. And maybe that's a fight that should happen. Otherwise than that, you're looking at Pantoja, or you're looking at Royval, or the gentleman who just came over who lost to Pantoja even. I think he was from Ryzen as well. Or he won.
Oh,
yeah. Pantoja just lost to this guy, too.
Yeah. But, man. Asakura, I think that's what it is.
That was it.
Yeah. Asakura, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a fight you could make, too. I think that could be exciting.
Yeah, that would be fun, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. I enjoyed this card. I enjoyed this main event. What did you think of the main event?
Yeah, I thought Erceg's boxing looked crisp and technical, but Moreno also looked very good defensively. Like he had clearly been working on his boxing defense, lots of head movement. And also I noticed, and I've noticed this before, but Moreno has like deceptively long reach. I think a lot of guys feel like they're safe when they're standing a certain distance from him, but he lunges in and he has long arms, but he holds his arms in so close it's hard to tell. He doesn't do a lot of the range finding that people do. So helps him land.
With his leaning in too, by the
way.
Oh
yeah, he's gonna get kicked in the head for sure. I mean, Irsay did land that one knee on him when he was leaning in there that hit him pretty good. But yeah, Moreno was obviously very motivated, like you said, had never gotten a win in Mexico in the UFC, finally earns that win. He was putting everything behind all his punches, all his strikes, to try to get the finish. But ultimately, I think he won some very close rounds by well-timed takedowns. At the end of round 5, he got that takedown, and that probably won him the round. There were a lot of close rounds. So ultimately, he gets the victory. Good on him. Like you said, you talked about the matchups. He wants to be on that September Noche card in Guadalajara. So I think I didn't think about the Kai Asakura fight. That would be really fun. So I think that might be the way to go. But Royval in Mexico would be fun too.
Yeah.
Again,
yeah. There's a lot of fun fights you could do. The Kai or the Kai Car France actually be a fun fight too.
Yeah, it'd be fun too.
Yeah. So, but any of those fights where, especially you're gonna get a fun fight like that, I think having him on that USA Noche card though. Definitely a good idea. Right.
He's your standout Mexican star,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're right. We just talked. He has a fight coming up with.
He's just very inactive, is Yair's thing. But yeah, he's got a fight against Pitbull. Well? Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, possible. He's fighting next week. Definitely enough time to. I mean, he fights once a year though, so.
I know. Yeah, but if I was UFC, that's the people I'd be looking at.
Last time I remember him fighting in Mexico was that Jeremy Stevens fight, though. I mean, he was all amped up and he poked Jeremy in the eye 10 seconds into the fight, and it got canceled, and he was all upset. And so maybe they could get him to go back on that one. But
let's see. Yeah. Well, let's get to this weekend's fight: Emmett versus Murphy. Looking forward to this main event. Are there any other fights in this card besides the main event and co-main event?
Yeah. On the prelims, Davey Grant is fighting Daniel Santos. That's a bantamweight matchup. That's good. That's a good matchup. And then Brad Tavares versus Gerald Meerschaert is on the undercard, and Kennedy and Nzechukwu versus Martin Buday is also on the undercard. So pretty good fight night. But let's get into this co-main event. Pat Sabatini versus Joanderson Brito.
All right, Joanderson Brito, 17-4-1, 8 KOs, 7 subs, 2 decision, 5-2 in the UFC. Pat Sabatini is 19-5, 2 KOs, 12 subs, 5 decisions, 6-2 in the UFC. So pretty evenly matched records here. When I see this kind of evenly matched, I think we're probably looking at decision. I'm going to go Sabatini decision.
Pat Sabatini, great grappler, tough guy, but I think Brito's probably the favorite. He can probably match Pat's grappling, and he has a clear advantage on the feet. He was also beating Diego Lopez the first 2 rounds of their Dana White Contender Series fight before poking him in the eye early in the third, and they had to stop the fight. So I think Brito puts it on Sabatini early on. I'm going to say round 1 TKO for Brito.
All right. Brito is me. I got to do a little more Brito homework. All right. So.
All right. Moving on. Main event. Josh Emmett versus Lerone Murphy. This is a very interesting matchup.
Yeah, Murphy undefeated. 15-0-1, 7 KOs, 8 decisions. He's 6-0-1 in the UFC. His first fight in the UFC was a draw. He's had performance night once, fight night once. Josh Emmett, 19-4, 7 KOs, 2 subs, 10 decisions. He's 10-4 in the UFC. All losses have been to tough competition. Only time he's been finished was he was choked out by Yair Rodriguez and knocked out by Jeremy Stevens in a fight. I think he learned a lot about himself. He's coming off a very vicious knockout win over Bryce Mitchell, one of the biggest like nastiest knockouts you'll ever want to see. Performance of the night twice, fight night 3 times, most knockdowns in UFC featherweight division history. So this is a guy who can grapple too. This is definitely going to be Murphy's toughest test.
Oh yeah,
at this point. I'll go Murphy. I'll say that he's undefeated. He's going to find a way to win, but we're going to find out what that chin is made of. There's a good chance he gets knocked out. But since I've already gone Sabatini, let me just go Murphy, and we'll see where he's out. Murphy by decision.
Yeah. It's wild to me that Bryce Mitchell has fought, and since his fight with Josh Emmett, and Josh Emmett hasn't fought. Just based on how terrible that knockout was. And also, like, Josh Emmett needs better management, because he should have been capitalizing off that knockout immediately and trying to catapult himself into something. But anyway, that has nothing to do with this fight, but I just wanted to mention that. But
no, but it's interesting. Like, he's been off this long, and then he gets an undefeated guy that isn't big name value.
Yeah, exactly. This doesn't immediately get him to a title shot. When you knock out somebody and they're twitching on the ground like that, that should count for 2 knockout fights or whatever, So, anyway, back to this fight. If we're comparing strength of schedule, yes, Lerone is undefeated, and he's faced some good guys, including Danny Ige. He just beat Danny Ige. But Josh has faced world-class guys, like you mentioned. Not always winning those fights, but the experience in the cage is amazing. That experience is intangible for sure. So, after saying that, I'm with you. I'm still picking Murphy. Josh has the most power at featherweight outside maybe the champion, but I would still probably pick Emmett punch for punch. Most likely, I just think that Murphy is so slick and he's so fast. He's going to be able to avoid those big overhand shots that Josh likes to land. So I'm going to pick Lerone Murphy by decision as well.
Okay. All right. We'll see see if we get it right. All right, guys. That's going to be this weekend's fight night. Chevy, why don't we tell people what we got coming up one more time?
All right. April 12th, UFC 314, live from Miami, Volkanovski versus Lopez. And then April 19th, we'll be talking about some PFL, more world tournament. And then April 26th, UFC Fight Night, Hill versus Roundtree, 9 p.m. Eastern from Kansas City, maybe.
All right. Well, let's see what happens. There are rumors that Hill is injured. But that's for the future. Right now, this weekend, enjoy Emmett versus Murphy. And thanks for tuning in to Combatcast. We'll see you next week.